Welcome to Hope, a podcast dedicated to the people whose stories reignite our belief that change is possible even when the world gives us a thousand reasons to doubt it. For this episode, please give a huge round of applause as we welcome one of the most passionate educator and person I have ever met, Becky Parker. I met Becky for the first time when I went to volunteer for the very amazing biodiversity project at the Simon Langton Girls Grammar School, and I knew right then that I have to call her as a guest on the podcast. We had a long conversation revolving around schools being anti curiosity, the education system being change resistant, youth engagement, passion among the youth, women in STEM, the barriers to women pursuing STEM careers, and much more. I enjoyed my time talking to Becky and genuinely felt inspired by the end of it, some of which I hope is passed on to you today. First of all, thank you so much, Becky, for doing this. I honestly didn't think that you would agree to it. It's like maybe she's a bit too busy and if she would want to come. But it happens. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. So also I've been trying to first of all, my teachers would be very happy today because I'm talking to a physicist and I've always hated physics somewhere. It was just because it was the way it was taught in our schools, like mugging up 15 chapters and just in a week appearing for the exams. So yeah. But I've been thinking about how I will start this podcast and I was reading this book, The Mastery of Love. So it's not related to our podcast, but I found something in the book which was very relevant to what we can talk about today. So like for example, I was reading about how all human beings tend to carry this emotional wounds within ourselves, and we think having mental health problems and emotional wounds is very normal to each one of us. And what tends to happen is we pass on those to children as well. Like we tell children what to do, how to read, how to dream, how to live, which in a way leads to domesticating them. And I feel that's somewhere what the education system does. And eventually I feel like, at least from my experience, it tells you that your life is all about punishment and rewards, and it kills curiosity within yourselves. And I feel that's something we should learn from children and not the other way around. So I would love to ask you, do you feel schools sometimes tend to be anti curiosity for children?
Well, that's really interesting because yesterday I was in Geneva. I was invited to give a keynote at a UNESCO celebration of 100 years of the International Bureau of Education. And I was saying, education is what remains when you've forgotten everything that you've learned at school. And what can we do to empower young people? In science, I think we should allow them to do genuine research. There was this beautiful moment because one of the things I did about 10 years ago is I set up a charity called the Institute for Research in Schools, and we were launching a project looking at Spitzer space telescope data, and that was going to be then used to decide what were good things to look at on the James Webb Space Telescope. And we're launching it with a whole load of 14-year-olds in a big comprehensive school in Scotland. And this boy, and it still brings shudders to me actually, he said, "Miss, I feel included." They were looking at new data, they were doing real stuff. 5 girls actually found a whole new star cluster, and these children were actually using new data which nobody had seen before. And that's what the excitement of science is.
Yeah.
Surely science is about doing something. The analogy I always give is I play the bassoon. And if I was trying to inspire somebody in music, I wouldn't say, "Look at this bassoon," or "Look at somebody playing it." You would say, "Play it," wouldn't you?
Right, exactly.
And why don't we do science? Why don't we actually allow young people to be unbound and contribute themselves? And when they do this, of course, they're scientists and they love it and they see that science is vibrant and loads of opportunities, and their ideas and their creativity contributes, which is, well, that's why I set up Project Earth.
Yeah.
My charity now is to empower young people to innovate for the planet. And who knows what they'll do, because the sort of general feeling is that you do all stuff that you're told and stuff that's delivered to you until
Right.
you get to about 24 when you're allowed to have your own
Yeah.
ideas. Well, that's mad, because young people are the most creative, have the most imagination, and we should be supporting this curiosity,
That's true.
not dampening it down.
That's very true. I feel like by the time you get 24 and you're asked to be free, you have actually lost all that freedom because of the things you are being told.
Yes, no, I
So,
think you're right, and I think
Yeah.
and I think research backs that up as well. I think we would be better if we actually relish the crazy ideas of young people. Some of them are crazy, some of them are brilliant. Just let them contribute and feel that their ideas and solutions for their future are really valued.
Have you felt any time when a student of yours gave you a suggestion and you were like, whoa, I never thought about this?
Loads.
Is it?
Oh, yes. So when we came back from CERN, we always used to go on a big trip to CERN, and when we came back one October in 2007, actually, it's ages ago, we were going to enter for this competition, and we'd visited a specific place at CERN which make detector chips for radiation monitoring. And this student said, well, how about if we put those up in space to measure cosmic ray activity in space? And I said, that's a brilliant idea, but I bet they've already thought of that. So I got in touch with CERN, and of course some people had, but they hadn't actually got it out into space. And my students, 16, 17-year-olds,
Whoa.
were the first to get this technology from space into open space on Demosat 1.
That's so
yeah,
cool.
Of course, kids can do. Yeah, kids have amazing ideas. And we sort of, close them off where we should be trying to open them up, because that's surely what we want to do as teachers, and how we can't be replaced by AI
Yeah.
is if we're empowering and engaging and supporting students. I mean, for Project Earth running at my school now, we've got about a dozen projects. One is a wristband to measure air quality. One is a innovative children's book. One is a recyclable pen. One is looking at oysters. Loads of different projects. And, young people amaze me every day.
They do. That's quite interesting. Also, I didn't mention, but you're free to ask me any questions or make statements. It's not like I'm going to ask question, answer. It won't work that way. It's not an interview, so...
Can I ask you then?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you feel you got closed off? You clearly didn't, because you're brilliant, open-minded, inspired by different things according to your passions.
Yeah.
What kept you excited about the world?
What kept me excited? So I would say it has happened like in the past couple of years when I've started to explore more of myself. And as you said, like being around children, like for example, in the biodiversity project, like a very interesting thing happened. So I had a smooth and a palmate newt with me, and I was standing there telling every student about it. And the student comes running in and he was like, can you please put it in the water? I was like, it will be fine. He's like, no, please put it in the water. I was like, a child can be so empathetic towards the animals, and we tend to forget those things because we are working with animals every day. So that was quite interesting. And then there was a kid, like there was a team of two of them, and they were trying to get newts, and they found one. And the one goes, he's like, man, we make such a good team. Like that's such a good thing to say, and clearly shows that you're learning something more than just science or whatever is written in the textbook. You're learning about people, you're learning about establishing relationships with each other.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting. But for me, like, I don't know, as I was telling you before this as well, like snakes, as soon as I see a snake, it's just infinite. It makes me infinitely happy. I don't know why, but it just gives me that adrenaline rush. And I feel like more than textbooks, if you just see around yourself, you have a lot of things you can learn from. Like it can be the smallest thing, like maybe a tree growing, the seasons changing. And like there was a quote which I really read a lot of times, which says like, you should be like nature, you should be cyclical like nature, because there's a time to harvest, a time to reap, a time to sow. So there's a time for everything, and if we can learn that from nature and not just burn ourselves of work every single day, we can also be very good, productive, and maybe lead a better life.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah.
think that's a really good point, that we are part of nature, aren't we? And there's so much sort of discontinuity
Yeah,
about how so many people don't think that. They think nature's for us to exploit, which it isn't, because we rely on nature.
exactly. That's very
So
true.
how the thing I think about snakes is, when I was a little girl, I was walking with my family, and I was running up this hill, and I was just about to put my hand down on this rock, and there was this huge snake, and I obviously screamed, and my mum goes, "Oh, what's going on?" And I don't know. Are you just not fearful of snakes?
I guess we all are somewhere, and I feel like a healthy level of fear is important. But I feel people fear snakes for all the wrong reasons. Like, I always say that you fear a tiger, right? If it was a
Yeah,
tiger, we all
yeah,
would be fearful of it. But we are fascinated of tigers. But people fear snakes for all the wrong reasons. They be like, oh, because like in India, they would believe that if a snake does this thing, like it's bad omen on you, or you should give milk to the snakes to make the gods happy and all those things. So people fear snakes for all the wrong reasons. Like, obviously it can be a venomous snake and can put you in coffin in a few minutes or an hour, so you should fear it because of its capability to harm you, but it won't harm you if you don't mess up with the snake. So it's the snake's natural defense mechanism. Like, for example, someone hits you, you would hit them back.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so like, I understand people being fearful of snakes, but I just want to be and make them understand that be fearful of snakes, but at least for the right reasons, and appreciate them for their fascination.
And I suppose that's back to the same thing about working in harmony. You know,
Exactly.
snakes are in their habitat, and if somebody barged in your room, then you would barge them out again, wouldn't you? You wouldn't want them
Exactly.
to just come in and
Like, even if I go out
trample.
for a survey and we see an adder, like, as soon as the adder sees us, it just runs away because it has
Yeah,
no business coming in contact with us.
yeah,
So
exactly.
snakes want the same thing as we want, to just stay away and mind their own business. So that's something. But yeah, like, you're saying before how you would want, like, in a way, more practical learning. Like, for a musician, they would play music and learn. Like, that's something me and my friends used to think a lot in school, that why are we taught about the electric board by just reading? Like, can't you show us how it works? Like, that would be so much fun. So we used to enjoy our practicals, going up, like, letting the white light go through the prism and seeing it come out in 7 colors. So I feel more practical learning is important. But do you feel like sometimes what science is taught to us in the schools is science at all, because it's just going through the books, just reading about it, but never actually trying that?
Well, I mean, we try and do lots of practical, and there's huge moves to get more and more practical. But it's got to be. It can't be just practical for the sake of it. It's got to be valuable for learning.
Hmm.
Um, I think there should be more unlimited, unbound stuff. Not that you want people to recreate the wheel, but so, for example, come back to Project Earth, this group who are doing the wristband, they aren't even doing science A levels, so they've learnt, well, some of them aren't, they've learnt loads of new things like coding with Arduino, they've learnt how to solder, and because they are passionate about this innovation, they've learnt what you need to do in a way which matches, a bit like with the satellite. It was so funny, I had to go on Radio Kent and defend the fact that I'd been out with these students putting this payload up in space for quite a number of days out of school. And this other head teacher, not from the school I was at, said, well, you're not obviously doing the curriculum. And I said, if you could see what these students have had to learn to be able to make a payload to go on a satellite. Not only have they learned all the physics about radiation monitoring, the circular motion, the satellite orbits, they've learned it because they want to and because it's really relevant for them putting this payload up in space. And they'll do better in their exams. I think the problem is we're so tight, constrained and in a straitjacket, really, because of exams require, a set lot of knowledge, which, I'm not against. People have got to know stuff and people have got to feel as though they've got a base from which they can then flourish. But, for certain years in a school curriculum, the kids are so focused on just doing exams that they are not allowed to do amazing stuff which actually will be really beneficial for their sort of journey and learning and experience and other skills. For example, on Monday, a whole group of students are going to report at University College London for the Orbits Conference. Now, they've been looking at the atmosphere of Jupiter and they've been looking at new data on the atmosphere of Jupiter, and they found some amazing things. And can you imagine 14-year-old presenting at UCL on physics data which only they have looked at? It's incredibly inspiring.
It is.
And we can do that. There's enough data, there's enough information for young people to be a genuine help. Somehow, the mechanics of it, people think it's more complicated than it is, but genuinely actually allowing everyone to do something real in science. Could they do stuff in biosciences? Obviously, I'm a physicist, but there must be surveys and data and sampling they could do, which would all be new and useful.
We saw them do at the biodiversity project example.
Exactly.
Like they were doing pond dipping, which I learned this year. Like I went for butterfly transects, and those were the things that I did for the first time as well. And I was learning as much as they were learning. So I don't think it's about like learning at a particular age, because as we say, like learning has no age. So if you take kids out, you tell them about nature, they will learn because they are curious about it.
Yeah.
And I remember this one kid, so he was going, and we were talking about it during a break as well, that he told his friend, he was like, man, we didn't learn anything today. But what he meant was that they weren't in a class reading through books, because they actually learned something by staying outside, like how to conduct these ecological surveys, because these are the similar surveys an ecological consultant would be doing as well. So they did pretty much the same thing. So that was very interesting. But as he was saying, like, we don't have a lot of practical learning, right? And the curriculum is not the best for children because it involves them, like in India, it involves a lot of mugging up. But don't you feel like this, like our education system in a way is broken? Because these are the things I used to talk to my friends like 5-7 years ago when I was in school, and it has been more than a decade and we are still are talking about the same things. So do you think like it's broken in a way? And if it is, like, who do you think is actually benefiting from this broken system? Because it doesn't seem to change, so maybe someone is actually benefiting.
I think there's a lot of inertia in the system. I think it's got so entrenched, the case with that student, that, if you're learning, you must be in a classroom writing stuff down or doing questions or doing exams. And there's a lot of, I don't know, because at this meeting yesterday, we were talking about the last 100 years and the next 100 years of education, and UNESCO International Bureau of Education is, pretty influential in curriculum. And I was saying in physics, well, definitely over the last 50 years, there hasn't been huge changes.
Yeah.
We've introduced particle physics about 30 years ago. That was linking with CERN. But I was part of the team who did that. But there's a general sort of conservative approach with a small c, which is that you mustn't lower standards. And that if you then don't have these high stakes exams, then somehow children won't be prepared. And there are a lot of arguments that, if you help children from disadvantaged families to get higher GCSEs, then their chances in life are expanded.
Mm-hmm.
So it's partly the whole structure, that the pressure of sort of competition between young people to get into high stakes universities or high stakes courses, to get high stakes jobs, is always pushed by probably the more well-off end of society, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the speakers yesterday was the head of the international school in Geneva and was saying that competition was one of the things which drove so many students to try and get these fantastic scores to get into the top places, when actually what you want to be, encouraging amongst young people is collaboration, because like you said, with the pond, when young people work together, they achieve so much more. The sum is much greater than the parts. And there's a curriculum review happening now, and I'm on one of the sort of side panels, and I've been saying things like, could we have minimum, well, I started with half an hour per day, young people in nature. No. How about 10 minutes? Because we've shown that 10 minutes is enough to, decrease your heart rate and make you happier. And that's problematic. I said this yesterday for the whole world. Why can't there be an entitlement for every young person to have half an hour in nature every day?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be better? But it's like, oh, that's standards, they'll be dropping. It's partly as well because, education attainment across many countries is assessed very poorly, I think, by PISA tests, which are set tests which people across the world do. And, it doesn't test things which are really important. It just tests certain things. That's one of the problems. It's quite hard to test the things we think important, like how do you interact with nature, how do you work well in a group, how do you use your imagination and creativity. You don't want to test that so that it becomes a sort of a set project where you all do the same thing. The whole thing about education should be about allowing freedom and individuality and input from the student to follow their passion. And I think that's very hard to do in the sort of standard factory type system that we run across the world.
Yeah, but what do you think? Spending, as you mentioned, spending 30 minutes out in nature, it drops standards. What kind of standards are we talking about?
It doesn't, but it's just not part of how people run education systems, is it? I mean, there were some schools in the pandemic which converted their timetable straight from what it was face-to-face to that online. So you'd be teaching 6 hours a day online to these poor kids. And then some schools thought, no, we need a Wellbeing Wednesday. We need the students to be outside doing stuff. We don't need to be sitting in front of a computer, 6 hours every day, 5 days a week, or even 6 days a week. That would be ridiculous. So it's about what is sort of prioritised in my mind about what's valuable in education. I would say, loads of the students who I've taught over a long time, I'm still in touch with. And it wasn't because, we did an interesting lesson on capacitors or something. It was because we went to CERN, we did loads of cool things. When I went with the satellite team, they were out for many, many days in the 2 years which they were putting this payload up in space. We went to the BBC, went to the Open University, went to Surrey Satellite Technology, we went to Glasgow. We went everywhere because we were promoting what the students were making, and we were liaising with all the leaders, and we were on telly, and all those key team are now flourishing in life, as you would expect, because it wasn't just about learning A-level physics. It was about, right, we're going to put something up in space. What are we going to do?
How old were the students you were working
They
with?
were, so year 12 and year 13, so 16, 17, 18.
That's a lot of exposure at that age.
I know.
Like that's so fun. Like
So we met Buzz Aldrin at the Farnborough Air Show. They were on telly, explaining what they were trying to do to various newsreaders on the BBC. They won major competitions. They, communicated their passion. They taught with the most. David Cook, who was our brilliant engineer from Surrey Satellite Technology, just amazing. He said, I wished I'd had something like this when I was at school. And he put hours into if you get the right people, he just supported my students and the whole thing worked, and we got thousands and thousands of frames of data. We had to put up commands to the satellite every week. One week we couldn't because they had to move it because it was about to be hit by some space junk. We then had to analyse that and present it to NASA. This is what young people can do. So why settle for anything less? That's the trouble. I think the people who say, we standards, exams, content, they forget the power of young people just doing amazing stuff themselves and how they learn and collaborate, and they all had different skills. Yeah, it was extraordinary, actually.
yeah, I don't think any kind of classroom experience can match that. Like
No.
that's impossible. But so I read about and I saw videos about your work with that's the organization you found, IRSS, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, I would love to know more about it, and then I have a leading question to that.
Okay, so I was doing all this stuff at my school, like with the satellite, and we also did an amazing project on multiple sclerosis, and we shared that with 5 other schools across the country, and our numbers in physics went rocketing up, our numbers in biology, we did chemistry research, we did astronomy. I remember working with some people here at Kent. I said, any chance I could take that radio telescope, which is out at the front. There used to be a radio telescope as you go up by the technology centre there. And so we managed to persuade somebody to lift this radio telescope down to school. We did cool things. We did amazing things. And these students spoke at the National Astronomy meeting. They all did really amazing things. And my take was that, why aren't all schools doing this? So I managed to persuade the person who was then head of industry and science, who was Vince Cable, who was in the coalition government in 2010 to 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to call it like the National Centre for Science Research and Engagement in Schools, some huge great long title. And I presented to all the people in Whitehall, and Vince Cable was so behind it, such that I happened to be at an event in London, and he said, how's it going? I said, well, we haven't managed to persuade the people in the civil service to actually pass this through. And he was so furious. And so we were hopeful, but then that's when the government changed. It was just so ironic. So we had to start again, but then I found an amazing funder who's still funding IRIS now, who decided that this was something which would be brilliant for science education. And so we set it up, we launched at the Science Museum, and we had a relationship then with the Science Museum. So we launched in the IMAX of the Science Museum, which was brilliant. And we had students talking about Lucid, the space experiment. We had amazing students talking about how they were looking at diabetes in the population in Tower Hamlets. And they spoke with such passion. We had one of my most amazing students, Anna, who had looked at galaxies and were trying to look at dark matter and galaxies, looking at new data and using new methods of programming. That was supported, this is so beautiful, that was supported by one of the original Lucid team, because of course Lucid had to then last over 10 years, because you got all the data, you had to process it. So one of the original Lucid team, who was then by then doing a PhD at Oxford, helped one of my students with galaxy data. And all these students presented, and the whole place was full. And everybody said, well, this is what we should be doing. We should allow young people to contribute to research. So that went on and on and on. And we got more and more projects, more and more support. And I think when I moved on, because I'd got more passionate about tackling the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis, we had about 500 schools, and there's still masses going on now. Loads of projects. They just, in fact, our students at school, I didn't go because I was somewhere else, but they went and presented at the IRSS conference in London this last Wednesday. And loads, I think it's the biggest number of posters on display, and students giving lightning talks. And there's loads of amazing projects. They're still doing cosmic mining. This one using Spitzer data. They're doing one on well-being. There's loads of amazing projects. So Irish flourishes, I just felt there was a whole gap in terms of how do we support students with their own ideas about the planet and biodiversity and tackling the climate crisis. And that's what I wrote to Prince William, and I said, you know, surely there should be some youth part of the Earthshot Prize, you know, the Earthshot Prize. And he wrote back and said, yeah, that'd be great. So then I set up Project Earth.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so Project Earth is not, I mean, we're partnered with the Earthshot Prize, and yes, if anybody listening would like to give me some millions, then I can award £1 million prize like the Earthshot Prize does. But yeah, so it's taking off, and yeah, especially with yesterday, UNESCO are really interested in collaborating with us. So we want this to go worldwide, and next summer on the 26th of June 2026. So as I was giving this talk yesterday, I said in exactly a year's time, because yesterday was the 26th, we will be running a Pitch for the Planet, so a demo day for students from across the world to pitch their ideas at the Royal Institution in London to investors and VIPs and advisors and special guests. And basically, you know, the equivalent, I suppose, to Lucid for IRIS is our project Pure Dye, which is, well, I can't claim any credit for this project. It is done by some amazing students in Spain and Turkey and the US, and they've developed a mechanism to take methane out of barns. You know, when lots of cows are stored in barns, loads of methane which just gets vented into the atmosphere, and they've invented this phenomenal system. And because there was such interest, the Imperial College Undaunted demo day at the Royal Institution just recently had Manuela speaking about this project, and she was brilliant. And then I spoke about Project Earth, and then we said, right, we need to have our own demo day for Project Earth. And Manuela is speaking at a huge Spanish festival. She is going to the World Biogas Association meeting. She's on our film of Project Earth, which is just a short film we showed at the Climate Innovation Forum, part of London as part of London Climate Week. There's this huge climate innovation forum which had ministers, Sadiq Khan, you know, the Mayor of London, had amazing people, and they showed our film for Project Earth there. And clearly, young people supported can think of new things which would genuinely help the planet. And it's their future, so give them agency and a way of contributing to that.
Yeah, that's very true. Like, just give them the chance, and like, I feel they are responsible young people. Like,
Yeah.
they are very responsible. They know what needs to be done, but it's just you need to give them the opportunity
Yeah,
to do it. That's
exactly.
interesting. So, like, let's take an example. For example, like, I am an educator in like the rural areas of India. For example, like, what step by step guide would you suggest adopting the model that you have been utilizing at IRIS to educate or to encourage young people in a small rural setting?
Well, that's interesting because actually, seeing a 14-year-old girl from India who invented or developed, however you would say it, a new ironing cart which wasn't using charcoal, it was using solar panels. So she immediately improved the air quality and the cost, and she was shortlisted for the Earthshot Prize. And I thought, with people like that doing amazing innovation, we need to encourage them more. We need that every category of the Earthshot Prize has young people applying in it, or young people shortlisted. I think it's interesting because we're developing the structure for Project Earth now, because we've tried it at school, and what we've done is we've given students some background information. I've trained them on the MIT, Sloan, Climate Interactive, En-ROADS simulator, which allows you to picture what interventions will bring the temperature down to 1.5.
Okay.
I was trained as a climate reality leader by Al Gore in Rome, and so I've given short talks to the students about what the situation is. One of the things we do is troposphere walking. So we say, right, if you could walk from here in Canterbury, straight up to the top of the troposphere and look down on all the greenhouse gas emissions, how long would it take you if you were walking sharply? How long do you think?
I don't know.
Yeah, so most students say 1,000,000 years.
Yeah, like it would take very, very long.
An hour.
An hour.
That's how thin the atmosphere is, which we filled up with carbon dioxide. It's about 9 kilometres up. So hour and a half, depends how fast you're walking. You could drive it. No, obviously you wouldn't want to be driving, but this is Al Gore's thing. There's one diagram which sums up the climate crisis. You look at the Earth and this tiny thin blue line takes you an hour to walk up and look at basically the rubbish bin of all the greenhouse gases which are below you.
Whoa.
I know.
That's so interesting.
So I do all that with students. I sort of set the scene. But then this is always the big conundrum. Everybody asks, what's your lesson plan? What's your structure? My structure is there will be students in, as you asked, rural parts of India who can see specific things which they think would make their lives, their communities, their land better.
Yeah.
And so, in a sense, it's saying to young people, what is it that you think you would like to work on? And what I did with I had about 60 students at school who all opted to do this Project Earth 1 hour a week. They all came up with completely different things. They've modified as they've seen some things they thought of already being developed, some things a bit too impossible to do. But, it's really about, it's not directing them, it's just allowing them to think themselves. And then what I've put in place is I've got over 80 amazing advisors, and will be getting loads more, so that people submit an idea and we say, right, that's a brilliant project, I don't have the expertise, I'll find somebody. Because my thoughts are, these people, say in the question you asked about rural India, they may not have access to somebody who could help them.
Yeah.
And that's where Project Earth steps in.
So basically you provide them with an expert who can help them with their project.
Exactly.
As well. That's quite interesting.
And we've also been using AI, which has been really useful. So I've got a brilliant person helping us with AI who's created expert groups on AI for all the different Project Earth projects. And that's given the students lots of insights into, you know, perhaps other people they could ask, or I could ask to be advisors, or other areas that are being developed. So that's been really helpful. And of course, young people are brilliant with AI. I think
Yeah.
we want to make sure they grasp that to really help.
Yeah, I feel like AI has been seen like as an evil, like you're using for cheating. Don't use AI, rely on yourself. But I feel like it can be very, very helpful, particularly in research and people getting to know more stuff. Like I use AI all the time because
Yeah,
it's very easy and gives you like very detailed answers about stuff that you would want to know.
yeah. So if
So I
you were
feel,
looking up about snakes or something,
yeah, like it's provided me everything about snakes, so
yeah,
it's easier to like read and know more information. So
yeah.
I feel AI is pretty good. But what do you feel as an educator? Like,
Well, I think that used in the right way, obviously, you don't want people to just look up answers and print out AI
yeah,
solutions and things, because then they don't learn. But if you make learning about how it's useful for you, then people will surely see that that's just a useless thing to do, because it just uses up loads of energy and doesn't actually benefit the learner. It just trots out a set of answers which benefit nobody. But if you're using to say, I've got a student who's making a multi-directional wind turbine, and they are using AI to optimize that design, so surely that is a brilliant use of AI. And you know, that's going to help accelerate the progress of this innovation, really.
yeah, yeah, that's very true.
Hugely.
Like, okay, so another thing I really want to talk to you about, and I feel like you have talked about it a lot, which is women being represented in STEM fields. Like, they are underrepresented. So I read a lot of papers, and I was quite shocked to read a few, and quite fascinated to read a few. And also, I got this idea because I visited with my friends. I visited the Margate Caves in Margate,
Oh, yeah.
and we were there. And this tour guide was talking about Margaret Bryan and how she used to teach science, maths, and astronomy at a time where like it was considered very noble to teach women needlework, languages, and music. And I instantly thought about it, like, oh, Becky is also doing quite good work about it. And I was reading about her, and it was like very, very inspiring. But so I found this research which was very interesting. So it was in a research paper that mentioned in 2014 a UK government science and technology committee inquiry into women in scientific careers in the UK reported that its investigation had not uncovered any new issues on the topic of gender diversity in STEM subjects, and it concluded that the problems and solutions have long been identified, yet not enough is being done to actively improve the situations, which basically targeted how key stakeholders haven't been very much involved in the active implementation of projects which are there to like promote more women workforce into STEM fields. And it also mentioned like how these arguments sit uneasily with the substantial sums that have been spent on initiatives aimed at increasing female participation in STEM over the past 40 years or so. And so it mentions how either these initiatives are not sufficiently informed by the evidence, or it is actually the case that we don't really know what the problems and solutions are. So if I had to ask you, like from your perspective, what do you think are the cultural or structural barriers a women would have to face in a STEM related career?
Well, my feeling is that a lot of women don't pick STEM because they don't find it that inspiring or interesting, and there's a lot of cultural rubbish about, you know, women aren't good at maths, all that rubbish, and there's a lot of words about you know, physics being hard. And you see, the thing is, when you do research like we did with IRIS, I had loads of women doing physics, and the thing is, they could see it had purpose, they could see it had opportunities, they could see it was exciting and evolving, and there's something they could contribute to. There's one girl who came to me in sixth form and said, "Oh, I'm doing business," and I said, "Oh, okay." She came to CERN. She got really excited that actually physics wasn't what she thought physics was, because she could see that she could have a role to play, and it gave her such confidence. And she's talked quite openly about that is why she went into physics. She's now a fusion researcher at Cullen.
Oh.
So there are loads of cases like this that actually, if you allow young people to be scientists, the thing is, there's no point giving women role models like Marie Curie, because amazing as Marie Curie was, that's not attainable by any person. You can't imagine that you'd be like somebody who gets 2 Nobel Prizes. I'm sure she's still the only person to have got a Nobel Prize in physics and in chemistry, which is phenomenal, because she was amazing. So you've got to give young women sort of ideas that other young women are there doing amazing things. With this Orbits project, for example, they meet loads of amazing young women PhD students, and Orbits has had real impact, encouraging women and people from different backgrounds to go into physics. I've worked a lot with the Institute of Physics, who have spent years trying to do stuff about improving gender balance in physics. And one of the things which did work was doing the CERN at School project, which arose out of our satellites. So we then put loads of these amazing radiation detectors into schools. And because students had an input and they had ability to contribute, and the answers weren't in the back of the book, it was like, cool, this is exciting, this is involving me. It's genuine sort of engagement of people. Not necessarily, well, I think it's everyone. I think doing something which makes the experience of doing science, by actually being a scientist, everybody's a scientist, but actually allowing young people to do science and to do stuff for the planet, then they can see the opportunities and they can think. They don't need to see people doing that. They just need to say, well, look, I am doing this. Of course I can be a physicist. Of course I can be a green entrepreneur. Of course I can be somebody working in the renewable business, because they're doing it.
Yeah.
So I think it's very much about, we can't tell students that, of course, it's fine for them to be doing physics because, the opportunities are brilliant. We've got to allow them to do physics and see, oh, this is exciting. Of course I can do it. And all this stuff about, physics is so hard. Of course I can do it. So I've said this a lot, and there is quite a lot of research. The only trouble is, if you want to have a large-scale research project like this to show the impact, you then have to restrict. You'd have to say, right, you have the whole boring lot of stuff, which is no exciting, real science, and you have the brilliant stuff. And it's very difficult to do research like that, like a randomised controlled test on that. Yeah. But we have shown that not only does it inspire students in STEM subjects, they carry on, they find a whole future, and it inspires the teachers, which then keeps them in the profession, which is a whole area which is thorny and tricky. But I think, teachers who are involved in research projects with their students love their experience of teaching more. I can say this for hundreds of teachers I know who do this. But why isn't that part of what you do as a teacher? Actually let them do real science and keep the teacher up to date with, their subject. I went into teaching physics because I love physics. I don't want to suddenly stop doing physics. I want to keep, finding out the latest things going on.
Yeah, that's very true. And the reason why I brought this topic is because, from my first internships to my first interaction with wildlife conservation, and even now, I've been surrounded with a lot of women who are doing a very, very good work in this field. Like, even from internships, even the idea of doing masters in the UK came from one of my seniors back home. So yeah, it made me think a lot. Like, why is this still happening? Because we as a society tend to assume that we are modernized, we have developed, but still we have the same thought process that they can't do this, they can't do that. So, like, for example, you teach at a school. Like, how many women or girls do you think are actually going and pursuing like STEM careers
Oh,
after their
loads.
schools?
Loads.
Has it increased over the
Oh, yeah.
years?
Yeah. But then we are doing loads of amazing things.
Yeah.
I think the numbers increasing worldwide, because I'm on a big committee with Engineering UK looking at this problem. I think numbers are not increasing as they were. They were increasing in physics a bit, and there's areas like computer science where the numbers of women are
Yeah,
higher.
yeah. I guess engineering also, it's pretty low,
It's
isn't
not
it?
as high as it should be, and it's not increasing enough, even though then opportunities. You know, one of our advisors for Project Earth is Professor Becky Shipley. Now, she's a phenomenal healthcare engineer. She was talking about how she was part of the team which developed the ventilator in COVID, which was easily manufactured. You know, they suddenly had to have thousands more ventilators across the world. And they did this innovation. I think they got the first one working in about 10 days. It was just extraordinary. And now she does loads of healthcare engineering. And I think we just, you know, there's a sort of image of engineering being what it was, say, 40 years ago. And engineering now is like green engineering, healthcare engineering, bioengineering. It's just vibrant and amazing, and students need to be aware of that. And I think probably the only way they can be aware is if there are things which they do which, you know, illuminate all of this for them. So, you know, it's all you need is a spark. You know, when I was thinking about what to do, I heard the lectures of Carl Sagan on the planets, and you know, Carl Sagan was just a hero and just extraordinary. I thought, oh my goodness, that would be so interesting. And you know, you just need a bit of a spark for students to realise that there are opportunities out there, and that they'll do amazingly. You know, if they go into engineering, loads of the women engineers who I've taught are doing phenomenal things.
I'm pretty sure you might have faced some such things as well, because I read you did your master's, was it, from the University of Sussex in 1980s, is it?
No, I did my master's in Chicago, actually.
What was in the University of Sussex as
Oh,
well?
I did teach training in Sussex. Yeah, I did
Oh,
my undergraduate at Sussex.
Yeah. Like, but that was also a time when, even though women representation was growing, but it was still not that big of a deal. But how did you think that I would love to go into this and like motivate or inspire other women to join in as well?
Well, do you want a little story on that?
Yeah.
So, I ended up going to Chicago for amazing. I had the most amazing physics professor at Sussex, who's Professor Tony Leggett, Sir Tony Leggett, Nobel laureate. He got a Nobel Prize for his amazing work, and he did the most amazing lectures on quantum mechanics, and I just loved this. And so I said, could I go and listen to his postgraduate seminars on philosophy of quantum mechanics? And so I did, and just inspiring. And I remember one day when one of the seminal papers had come out and was in an envelope, wasn't emailed in those days, it was just in a brown envelope, and Tony Leggett got it and he said, Peggy, these are the results from Alan Aspects. It was 2 photon correlations. It was like whether quantum mechanics would survive or not. And I remember, I'll never forget this, running up the steps and up to his office, and we were so excited I could hardly breathe. And he opened it up and said, oh, okay, quantum mechanics is fine. And he go, oh. And so, you know, I just got so inspired by this. And for random, balmy whole set of reasons, I ended up getting a whole scholarship to go to Chicago. And Tony Leggett, by that time, had got a MacArthur Fellowship and was at Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So I went to Chicago, And I did loads of cool stuff. In fact, I was always told off because I would go to the astrophysics group, and then I'd go to the string theory group, and then I'd go to what I was supposed to be going to, which was my master's on foundations of philosophical foundations of science, I think it was called, or was it called Foundations of Science? Anyway, the whole sort of encompassing everything amazing about science, policy, philosophy, history, and I remember David Schramm say, "Becky, are you doing a PhD with me?" I said, "Oh no, I'm really philosophy of science." And then I go to string theory lot. So I did it all. I just loved it all, and I was doing really sort of foundational quantum mechanics, and I remember going to an event which was about how to get more women into physics, and I'd always felt this. So as part of my final year project at Sussex, I had done what they call was a special module, and I'd looked at how we might encourage girls into physics at school, because it was Sussex was really innovative, and I could do this little special thing, and I worked with an amazing professor called Brian Easley, who had written lots of books about things like how the language of the search for the atomic bomb was all gendered, and he was really interested in. I did loads of research and read some amazing books and tried out some things in schools about how to excite. And I actually taught quantum mechanics to 12-year-olds to try and sort of show them that physics was amazing and about reality and, problems that we think about, what is the nature of reality, and what impact do we have, and how do, is the world objective out there, or is it all connected, not in a sort of woolly way, but in a very rigorous way in terms of quantum theory. And so I'd done all this stuff, and so I thought I would go along to this meeting, which was in a big hall in Chicago, and there were lots of women professors. So what was really funny, in Chicago, all the master students get a picture, and there's a picture of them all taken, because obviously loads of them will end up being Nobel laureates, and then Chicago wants to be able to say, "Oh yeah, that's why they came from this university." So there's a whole, and I was the only woman in this whole set of masters pictures, which was put up in physics, and there were lots of men doing obviously physics stuff, and then I was doing conceptual foundational physics, which actually was pretty hard. We were doing pretty heavy maths and stuff. It wasn't anything woolly in any shape or form, and underneath my name was put not a physics student, which I've got a first class honours in physics, and I'm certainly a physics student. Anyway, so I went along to this meeting, and all these professors, they must get more women professors, and I thought, this is mad. And so I put my hand up, and I said, we need to get more people into school doing physics. At that point there was still an option. My school, when I went to school, I wasn't allowed to do a physics GCSE. I had to do joint physics and chemistry, and that's all. I then went and did double maths, physics and chemistry A-level, but if many students would have put them off doing physics A-level because, they didn't have a full qualification lower down in physics. And I said, we've got to really encourage, girls in school and women to think that physics is for them and there's amazing opportunities. And these people looked at me, I don't know about that, we're dealing with academia here, we're dealing with numbers of physics professors. I said, well, you're never going to get physics professors unless they've done it at school and gone through the process. And I sat down, this was the weirdest, funniest, loveliest thing. I sat down and I said to this woman, I've been reading this really brilliant book by Alison Kelly. And she said, oh, have you? And I said, yes, it's really great. And that's what, makes me think about, we've got to get this stuff done in school. And she goes, I am Alison Kelly.
Whoa.
I know. Do you believe it? And she said, I'm on sabbatical here in Chicago. So I said, oh, well, I think your book's amazing. So we chatted, we became friends, we did loads of work together. And then, they said, well, normally a PhD in Chicago takes about 7 years. And I thought, do I really want to do a PhD?
Mm-hmm.
If my master's is supposed to be 3 years, I think. I thought, if I work like the Clappers, I can get my master's done in a year. Just a bit mad, because I did have to work like the Clappers. And what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to go back and teach and try and get girls into physics and really make that my mission.
Yeah.
And so then I phoned up Sussex and I said, any chance I could come back and do teacher training? And they said, yes, do come back. Because, of course, my master's had to go on white till September because I had to go like the Clappers to get it finished. And so they said, oh, yeah, come back. You might miss the beginning bit, but come back. So I went back and then did loads and loads of stuff. And because I was really keen on all this stuff, then I used to go to loads of lectures and things, and the Institute of Physics said, well, come and work here. So I taught for a few years, and then I went and ran loads of programs at the Institute of Physics. But fundamentally, I always felt, no, I've got to be back in the classroom because you can't be doing all this stuff unless you know what the problems are. So I constantly sort of like advised the Select Committee for the House of Commons for Science and Technology. In 2001, we did a report on science education. And so I've always been like doing loads of cool stuff, but then always coming back to teaching because it's actually in the classroom where you can make an impact and trying to be grounded. And so, I just think the thing is that science loses if it doesn't have a diverse workforce. And, we're all the poorer if we don't have contributions from lots of different people. So we've got to try and encourage everybody to see that there's opportunities for everyone and that there aren't barriers for them going into it.
Yeah, that's very true. I don't know if I said, but you're one of the most passionate teachers I've met for some reason. Because I'll tell you why I say that. Because when I was in India, I was visiting, I would visit my school every few months just to meet all my teachers. And one of them told me, she was like, we have a lot of new teachers coming in, but we have lost passion among teachers. You are actually shaping someone's future because they are spending 6 or 7 hours of their day, 5 days a week with you, and you'll have a lot of impact on them. And I feel many teachers don't realize how much impact they can have on their students because, that's I feel very important, and I feel really happy when you talk such passionately about it. It feels very, very good.
Well, I feel, don't you, that, I'm the lucky one. I get to meet all these young people every day, talk to them about, obviously you've got to get through this curriculum, but, you're talking with them about cool things and, you're constantly being challenged and life is never boring. And I think the whole image of teaching is got completely out of kilter with the sort of opportunity and privilege that I have to be teaching young people. It's the best thing, and somehow it's not recognised. It was so funny yesterday. There was some conversation between some people when I was saying, I was talking about the future of education, and I'm a teacher, and I said to somebody else, do you teach? Oh no, only higher level students. And I found saying, the best thing is teaching, in some ways, the most inspiring thing must be teaching primary. I remember one of my amazing professors, the other amazing professor at Sussex, was Professor Roger Blinstall, and he was like FRS, and he ran the education committee at the Royal Society, and he was wonderful. And he used to always tell me off. He said, Becky, stop asking questions about quantum theory, just take the maths. And I said, And so he, in his later years, unfortunately he's died now, but in his later years, he went into primary schools and helped primary school children be inspired by physics. Now, he said that was the most rewarding thing he had done. Now, that's what we should have as the image of teaching. But in order to do that, you've got to make teaching about, empowering, inspiring a love, not about your class results and your test results and your, you know, value added. You add value if you sort of inspire young people to then go on and, you know, find their passions, surely.
That's very true because yeah, like for example with physics, I can't tell how fun physics can be by just reading a book. Like I actually need to see how fun physics can be, and like while I was reading about you only, I realized that you can actually find the concepts of physics around you, like in everything. I found it very very fascinating. I might start reading a few physics books.
Can I ask you, what was it? Was it a teacher which inspired you into go into conservation and ecology? And
So with conservation, like I feel every other kid is very fascinated by animals. So what happened with me was I was very much happy keeping pets around me, but soon my parents gave them away because I wasn't being very responsible. So when I grew up, it was during the pandemic when I got a bowl of fish, which you should never get. Bowls are not good for fishes, but I didn't know back then, so I had, and they were live bearers, so they gave birth to like tiny fishes, and it was like so fascinating, like life being created in front of you. So I read more about it, and I got interested into like fish keeping and everything. And then I saw a guy, like his name is Chandler's Wildlife on YouTube, and he keeps venomous snakes. And I was like, whoa, that's so cool. Like I've never seen a person actually touch a snake. And there he mentioned the name of this renowned herpetologist in India named Gauri Shankar. So I was like, oh, there is someone in India who can do it. So I emailed him, I sent him a text on Instagram. I was like, I'll do anything for you. Like, I'll handle your social media, I'll do anything I can do that. Just teach me about things, just give me access to the network, just tell me how this field works. And that's how it got started with me handling their organization's social media account, and then them giving me all the knowledge I have today. And then I eventually went there, did like a month of radio telemetry work with the snakes, and then I got the idea of the masters, and like it just kept on from there.
so that is, see, that's a perfect example in a way, isn't it? You found your passion and you
Yeah.
just followed it. Get you into social media as well. How did that happen?
So social media. So what happened was when I reached out to Gauri Shankar. So what happened was I live in New Delhi. I didn't know anyone or any work that was being done there back then. The only thing I knew was that southern India has a lot of forests, so I'm pretty sure a lot of work goes on there. And since my parents were back then very much against me doing wildlife conservation because they thought that he would just run away from home and live in the jungle, that's what his conservation is. It's like, no, like just trust me on this. And now they support me a lot. But I reached out to Gauri. I was like, I can't travel because my parents won't allow me to do that. So anything I can do to be in touch with you, and I'll do it for free, like anything. So they were like, they saw my profile because I used to write blogs back then just to get the activism out of me.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, your creatives are fine, so just create a sample creative for us, and if it's good then you can handle our social media. And then it just led to me pursuing and working for them for almost a year, and then I took a 2 year gap, and then I did it for another year for them, and then I came here. So that's how I got into social media, and I feel like I can educate people from anywhere around the world. I don't have to be in a particular forest setting. I can do it sitting in my room. So, and it helps me reach out to like many people across the globe. So I feel it's a very good medium to educate people as well.
And
So
you do lots for DICE on this as well then?
yeah, I'm also the events and communication assistant at Dice. So I would make interactive videos, write blogs to help get reach for like Dice social media handles as well. So
Brilliant.
yeah, that's fun. But yeah, in the end, I would love to ask you like if you have any message of hope, as I would like to call it, for young people out there. Because like if I just had to give you an example, like I came from economics, and in very very early days when I thought that wildlife conservation is something I'll pursue, I was told, no, you're a commerce guy, like you come from maths, business studies, economics, like this is not your field. And finally one professor, where I was doing an add-on course in herpetology in back home, he said that you should have an added advantage because those people coming from science, so everyone knows that this is their career, but you left economics, you came to science, so you have to be damn passionate to actually change your career. So it should be your strength, and then it just twisted things for me. So any message of hope you would have for people out there?
Well, I think don't feel you have to follow a set path. you need to find your passion.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel that if people all start working towards a positive change in society, for the planet, for nature, we really could make a huge difference. And I know it's frightening, things like extreme weather events everywhere, to think that we can make a difference, but everyone can. And if everyone comes together and realises that, you know, it's not all on their shoulders, but working collaboratively and working with friends and communities, we can really start making a serious change, which is necessary if we're going to live in harmony with nature, if we're going to make the climate crisis really, I suppose, limit the damage that it does. If we can really try and hold down the rising temperature so that, you know, more heat stress isn't out there for communities across the world, if we can work together for climate justice, if we can work together to support communities experiencing climate change and its devastating impacts right now, if we can be more together for the planet, for us as people, us as part of nature, we can do great things. And that's hopeful. And I think young people now have such potential to make the future better, because the future is theirs to create, isn't it? And if we can really be hopeful that we can counter disinformation, we're not going to be taken in by people who are determined to think of short-term gain and can't upset the status quo. We've got to live differently. And if we could live differently, we'll live more healthily. The air will be cleaner. It will be more wonderful living with nature. The future out there is better if we can only work together to change it and make it into something which is better for all, and throw away lots of these ideas that we have to have such ridiculous consumption, and we have to have, you know, private jets and private boats and loads of these, and that's what makes you happy, because it certainly doesn't seem to make many of these super rich people happy. Let's think about how we can work with nature and still have fulfilling, amazing lives which aren't based on stuff, and which can be richer because we are bringing back nature and the planet into a state of well-being. And I mean this genuinely, for not some soppy, you know, image which people who don't agree with this would like to put on people who might think about being with nature and connecting with the wonderful planet that we live on. I just feel that we could be so much better if we could somehow realise that fame and celebrity was not about staying in the most expensive hotels in Venice or whatever's going on right now, but was actually caring for the planet and caring for people who don't have as much. And you can get married quite cheaply probably and just be just as happy. And you can, you know, I mustn't refer too much to this wedding going on in Venice, but you know what I mean. We can all live in a way which shares resources and is more equitable and just. So let's, you know, realign our lives to be healthier, greener, happier and more fair, and we can do that together. And that's the hope I feel, if we can work together and young people can drive this, not giving them the worries of what's going to happen, but actually enabling them to see that hope is there that we can make things better.
I have another question. Just last one, but like you said, like I feel to us it seems very obvious about the positive changes that need to be made with nature, right? We feel like nature is important, which it is. But how do you convince people to, like, everyone knows that it's a positive change, everyone knows that don't throw plastic here, everyone knows save nature, but how do you actually inspire them or make them follow the same path of actually going towards a positive change?
I think we've got to be very honest and call out people who are just saying ludicrous things about how we don't need to do this because they want more money to do quite what I do not know. So, when young people see cartoons about children sitting in caves saying, well, at one point we had a beautiful planet, but then there was a lot of short-term gain for shareholders, and that's what's happened. It's horrific. Oil companies and fossil fuel producers cannot carry on as they are. They've got to realise that profits for shareholders are worthless in a world which is far too hot for huge swathes of the population. This cannot happen. And I don't know what other wake-up calls you need. Fires, floods, pandemics, the heating of the Arctic, the permafrost melting. What else do we need to see before people will act decisively and urgently and not say, oh, it's making us far poorer? It's not. It's going to make us healthier. It's going to give us cheaper energy if only we can get past this, press of doom and climate denial. And I don't know what purpose is served by these people who keep saying that's not the way forward, apart from they get more money from fossil fuel, dividends or whatever's going on there. I may sound ignorant or sort of naive, but the bottom line is all this money is not going to be any use if we've got no planet on which to survive.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. I also feel like we just need to convince people that saving nature is a selfish thing, because we as humans tend to be selfish. So if we can just convince people that it's a very selfish act to keep that particular tree or species around you, I feel people can actually start conserving nature.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, nature will survive. It will be us who won't survive, won't it? And we've got to realise that we're integrated with nature, and that nature is the most extraordinary environment which we're part of. And as you say, about coming back to what you said right at the beginning, that if we're in tune with nature, our lives are going to be far more satisfying than just buying some extra stuff.
It's true. Cool. Thank you so much, Becky, for doing this. It was very, very fun. Like, I didn't expect all those things I got out of this podcast, but it's very, very good. Thank you.